Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Talk Tech with Turtle. My name is Anthony Vu, and for those who don't know me, I'm your friendly local PLC and HMI automation specialist at Turtle here. And today I'll be talking about FactoryTalk Optix. So what is FactoryTalk Optix? So FactoryTalk Optix is essentially a new product in Rockwell's portfolio that is a modular, flexible, and scalable data collection and visualization platform. So what this means is this basically does what an HMI does, but it does additional things as well. And we'll get a little more into the details throughout the presentation. And this is a more modern platform compared to FactoryTalk View and PanelViews that you may be used to, and it supports some of the more IIoT focused functions and features such as the cloud, remote access, and edge capabilities. So Optix at its core is essentially a software. It is fairly hardware agnostic, but Rockwell does offer a robust hardware portfolio that is dedicated to running Optix, and it comes with a lot of value, as we'll explore throughout this presentation. Now, a lot of the questions that we get when presenting Optix is, okay, with all of this cool stuff that Optix can do, will it replace PanelViews or FactoryTalk View? And the answer right now is no. So Optix is a parallel offering to FactoryTalk View and PanelViews. Rockwell expects to continue supporting PanelViews and FactoryTalk View for the next 10, 15 years and plus. Now, with all of the resources and R&D that Rockwell has been developing or doing for Optix, it's quickly catching up and even surpassing FactoryTalk View capabilities as we speak. So we expect FactoryTalk Optix to take the limelight in the near future, and PanelViews will start to sit more as a secondary option for HMIs for new applications. Now here's just a brief architecture review for Optix. And on the left here, you have your OT network, right? This is your controllers, your drives, right? Machine production data, field devices. What Optix does at that level is it helps you collect all of that data. You could do embedded data logging into your Optix hardware, or you could do remote data logging. Optix can create data logs on a remote database, such as a remote SQL database, communicating to it via ODBC protocol, or it could be a remote InfluxDB database. And Optix also supports various protocols. So it could collect data not only over Ethernet IP, it can also do some native third-party native serial drivers. For example, if you have some Beckhoff controllers or Siemens controllers out there, it can communicate with it. But more importantly, Optix also supports the full OPC-UA specifications. So it can act as an OPC-UA server, so it can collect all the data from all those varying vendors or devices from various vendors on your floor, and they can communicate with each other through Optix. Or if you have an existing OPC-UA server already doing that, Optix can tap into that OPC-UA server as a client. So you could take that data, you could bring it into Optix and visualize it from there. Now from there, again, from a visualization standpoint, Optix, just like a traditional HMI, can support local visualization. That's a physical touchscreen, or it could be a physical keyboard plus monitor, but it also supports a web server. So HMI web server based off HTML5. You could tap into a running Optix device using a remote computer or a phone or a tablet connected over a network, and you can get your visualization right in the palm of your hand. And finally, Optix can act as your edge. So from the edge, it can collect all of your data, it can contextualize the data, right? Put it into a form that's easy for your cloud applications to digest and process, and it can port it over to the cloud either through MQTT protocol or REST API. And we're seeing these type of applications pop up more and more. For example, data mosaics, we've seen some Plex applications and Fix as well. So Optix can act as your OT to edge and then to cloud gateway. Now, where does Optix sit on a scalability perspective. So for one, optics can be your machine level HMI panel, just like your PanelView, just like your PanelView plus 7, PanelView 5000s. There's something called the optics panel that can serve as your standalone machine level HMI running optics purely for HMI functions. But optics panels also offer you some flexibility beyond just an HMI. It can act as your remote access gateway, for example. It can still act as your edge gateway as well. Now, moving up from there, skip from to a scalable HMI, optics, you can utilize the built-in web server to support any number of web clients you wish, right? So there are some caveats to that. It would depend on the power of your hardware and your licensing, but you can support up to unlimited number of web clients. So you can support a decent number of displays using optics as your web server. And finally, from the edge. So optics does something that PanelViews don't, is the ability to act as an edge device. So what you would do for an edge device, you could run containerized runtimes, containerized applications. It can collect data, route data. It can act as your communications gateway. Anything that you would need to transform the data that you're collecting at the OT layer and then convert it to your enterprise layer or the cloud, optics can do for you. Now, some additional capabilities is FactoryTalk Remote Access. So a lot of optics hardware that you'll see have built-in remote access capabilities. So FactoryTalk Remote Access is Rockwell's remote access VPN solution, very similar to the E1 solution. And again, this is baked into a lot of the dedicated optics hardware that we'll be covering today. And optics is also supported on Thin Manager. So if you already have a server client architecture out on the field that's utilizing Thin Manager to deploy applications to thin clients, optics is compatible in there. You could run optics as a runtime client, or you can containerize it into something like Google Chrome and deploy it to your thin clients that way. Now, a bit more on the scalability. So there are three layers or three categories we can talk about. One is FactoryTalk Optix for HMI. Again, standalone HMI, it could be either a dedicated optics panel, which is just like an HMI, right? It's embedded touchscreen with processor all in one. Or you could run it as a more traditional computer monitored keyboard. And that one does come with a bit of a caveat to run, but that gives you access to more powerful hardware to run more complex or larger applications. Then you have optics for edge. There are dedicated edge devices that Rockwell offers, namely the optics edge and the embedded edge compute. And these are headless devices. So typically for an edge device, you don't necessarily need a physical screen for it to do what it needs to do. But the cool thing is with optics, it has a built-in HMI web server, so you can still get visualization to your phone or tablet or remote computer if you wish. And then finally, optics for SCADA. So this isn't out yet. This is planned to be released sometime late 2026. But optics for SCADA will give you the capability to centrally manage your optics applications and give you the ability to communicate or interact with server-based resources or databases like a historian. And it gives you the ability to add redundancy to your deployed optics fleet. So we have a couple of slides near the end of the presentation to go over this. Again, it's something that Rockwell just recently announced, and we'll see the first rollout with version 1.8, which is expected to come out maybe, again, late summer or early fall of 2026. Now, in terms of hardware, so as I might have mentioned earlier, optics is primarily a software, and your hardware is your choice. So you could deploy this to an industrial PC, right? If you need additional hardware or additional higher specifications to run a complicated or complex application, you could run on a thin client if you already have the thin manager install. You could run this on machine HMIs, or you could use some of the dedicated optics panels as well. And finally, there's headless units like the optics edge and embedded edge compute. So these are ideal for both a footprint saving and a cost saving solution for a dedicated edge applications. So let's go into the features of optics. So from a development standpoint, you could essentially develop your optics applications anywhere. So the Optics Studio software, which is the development software for FactoryTalk Optics applications, is available as a free download. So this is the local version of Optics that you download to your computer, and you can develop and test your Optics applications right away. There's a built-in emulator that will essentially create a 2-hour runtime on your computer, and you could test your Optics applications on there, and it supports real-time connection to a physical controller as well. So you could download Optics today, connect it to your controller, and start playing around and get a feel for optics. Now, there's a cloud version of Optix that is a paid version of Optix. It's called Optix Studio Professional, and that gives you the ability to host development sessions in the cloud. And by doing that, you have the ability to collaborate with your fellow engineers to accelerate your workflow by working on the same project in the same session simultaneously. And by having a cloud hosted session, you can also access that session on any computer as long as it's connected to the internet. You just need to log in to your FactoryTalk Hub, log into Optics, and you can continue or start your development on any computer. You don't need to download anything to use Optics Studio on the cloud. Again, it's hosted in the cloud, Rockwell's cloud, and anybody could log in there and begin development or continue development. And the cool thing is the Optics runtime itself that you develop is agnostic to the screen size. So what that means is it automatically scales to whatever hardware it's deployed to. So really, you only need one master copy of an optics application. You could deploy it to any piece of hardware for your application. So if your application evolves and you're using a different type of hardware, a different size screen, you don't have to worry about making any changes to your optics application. It will automatically scale everything to that piece of hardware, and you don't have to make any changes and make any revisions just for those changes. As mentioned earlier, multi-user collaboration and version control. These are the benefits of the Optics cloud-hosted session. And again, it's just like hosting a Google spreadsheet or an Office 365 spreadsheet where you can have multiple users inputting data at the same time on different sheets or even on the same sheet. Very similar concept here. Optics can host a cloud session for development, and you can have multiple engineers just log into that session and start working on their own screen simultaneously with other engineers. So this really accelerates the workflow and reduces time to market. And all of this is kept in check with integrated version control. And the version control is based off Git. And again, it makes it easier to maintain revisions for your projects. There's also built-in audit trails, so you can know who did what at what time. And by making revisions, you also have the ability to roll back to any desired revision in case something didn't quite work out. You need to roll back to the known stable version, right? Optics gives you that ability. You can also create custom libraries. So there's already a built-in library in Optics with thousands of graphical objects and functional objects and widgets as well. But depending on the application, you might want to create some custom objects, right? So you can create a library to store those custom objects, and you can share them to the cloud. So it makes that custom library centrally accessible to all of your engineers so they can use those custom objects during their development. And finally, everything in Optics is exposed through OPC UA, right? It's built with OPC UA at its core. And you can also leverage C# scripting to further customize your applications, and pretty much allows you to do whatever you would like to do in Optics, right? There's really very little limitations of what you can do in Optics. Now, in terms of deployment, you could deploy Optics again to your hardware of choice. As long as that device supports a Windows or Linux operating system, it will run Optics. Now, I will say that Rockwell also has a hardware portfolio dedicated for running Optics, and there's a lot of value behind that. And when we discuss Optics applications with customers, we like to bring all of that into perspective where we can create a package for you that would be best suited for your application. So if you have any projects that you would like to bring optics into, please let us know. We can certainly discuss and utilize the tools available to come up with a good package for that application. In terms of graphics, Optix adopts advanced SVG graphics, giving a crisper, higher contrast visuals compared to a PanelView that you may be used to. And all of these graphics, again, they're automatically scaled at runtime. So even if you tap into the web server using a mobile phone, Optix will do its best to rearrange and resize and relocate everything to still maintain legibility on a smaller display size. And your runtime. So runtime is a bit of a tricky concept to explain because Rockwell wanted this runtime to be very flexible, right? You pay for what you use. So every feature and optics that you use, be it your data logging, using alarms, what communication protocols you would like it to communicate with, or using OPC server, you're doing any reporting, all of that adds up to a cost in terms of tokens. And the runtimes are basically tiered according to token size. So it's a bit of a tricky concept to explain, but if anyone's interested in a deeper dive in optics, please let any one of us know, and we could set up a more dedicated focus session where I can walk through a demo on how to size a runtime and how to choose a device based on that. Now, in terms of other additional capabilities, right, Optix can do data logging, of course. It could be either embedded data logging to the local storage of the hardware, or it could be remote data logging. It could be to a remote SQL server over ODBC protocol, or it could be a remote InfluxDB database. You can also do some lightweight reporting in Optix. So Optix has a built-in reporting editor where you can create simple reports that you can have it automatically print out according to a schedule or automatically email to persons of interest according to a schedule. And Optix also has the ability to do some dashboarding as well. So a very convenient way to get critical information at a glance, either locally on the physical touchscreen or monitor, or remotely through your phone. For example, you just need to tap into the web server of Optix and you can bring up the dashboard screen on your phone. And finally, Optix also supports 21 CFR Part 11, right? It can be designed to meet those regulation guidelines, to meet 21 CFR Part 11 applications, and there are a variety of documentation and literature available to help guide you on how to create an Optix application conforming to 21 CFR Part 11. Now, we did speak about the protocols that it supports, Ethernet IP, native third-party drivers, and cloud protocols as well, such as MQTT, REST API, and even InfluxDB in the cloud. Now, Optix also supports full OPC UA. It can act as your OPC UA client, or it can act as an OPC UA server. And as an OPC UA server, it can also act as your communications gateway for all of your devices from different vendors in your system. And finally, you can collect all of that data, using OPC UA or any protocol you wish, and you could contextualize all that data and you could send it or port it over to your enterprise layer for analysis using data analysis tools at that layer, or you can port it to the cloud. So you could use something like Power BI or Flex or data mosaics to better process the data and make it visible, using cloud dashboarding, for example. And again, we've been seeing a trend of various applications beginning to explore those options. Now here we'll talk about the Optix Studio software. As mentioned earlier, there's the standard Optix Studio. This is the local install for Optix onto your computer. This does not require a license or entitlement. It's a completely free software for you to download and use and test with as well. The built-in emulator essentially is one-to-one on how you would see it on the emulator versus seeing the Optix application deployed to a piece of hardware. So it serves as a really good way to test an Optix application and see how exactly it would respond and interact with your controller and your data. Now, on the other hand, you have the Optix Studio Pro. This is a subscription-based license for Optix Studio in the cloud. And this gives you access to all of the capabilities that are associated with the cloud. So for one is FactoryTalk Optix Studio through a web browser. This is a cloud-hosted session that allows multiple users to collaborate and work on separate screens in the same session at the same time. It gives you ability to back up your Optix applications in the cloud through the FactoryTalk Vault, which is Rockwell's cloud storage service in the FactoryTalk Hub. It gives you access to the version control through Git and also custom library sharing as well. And you can even deploy applications from the cloud to a remote Optix panel or Optix device, right, from your office to someone's facility miles away. And that's through FactoryTalk Remote Access. So those are all of the capabilities that you get with the Pro subscription to FactoryTalk Optix. And if you haven't created a FactoryTalk Hub account yet, first-time FactoryTalk Hub accounts will have a 90-day free trial for the Optix Pro editor. So, and if you've already have FactoryTalk Hub account and your trial license expired, but you would like to give it another go, just let us know. We can get you another 90-day trial for Optix Studio Professional. Now, if you're looking to download Optix Studio to your computer, there are two websites that you can go to. On the left is the traditional PC-DC website where you would go to download pretty much any Rockwell software. But there's also the FactoryTalk Hub. So the FactoryTalk Hub is basically Rockwell's cloud-based portal. You'll find Optix on there. You can download Optix. You can download the runtime as well. And it also has a bunch of other great things on the FactoryTalk Hub, which includes a runtime sizing calculator, a device sizing calculator, and demo programs that you can see in action and you can download as well. So we do like to recommend going to the FactoryTalk Hub. To create a FactoryTalk Hub account is pretty simple. To sign in, you would just use your Rockwell account credentials to sign in. That creates a FactoryTalk Hub account for you automatically. And from there, there's a bit of a process of creating an organization and inviting team members into the organization. But if you're interested to learn more, please feel free to reach out to me and I can forward you the procedure. And now the runtime. So the runtime is what's required to run Optix on a piece of hardware. And Rockwell wanted this to be very scalable and very flexible. So you see there's different tiers, and the tier that you would select depends on the size of your application, right? What features are you using, how many tokens will be associated with your application. So tokens are like a measure of the size of your application, and from there we can pick out the correct runtime license. And really, this is only really a focus when you're wanting to run Optix on a just an industrial PC, right? But if you're running Optix on a dedicated piece of Optix hardware, like an Optix panel or an Optix Edge device, those come with built-in runtime licenses already. So you don't really have to worry about picking out a runtime license if you would like to run Optix on dedicated hardware. So that's one of the benefits of dedicated hardware. And they come with a fixed size. And again, we can utilize the calculators on the FactoryTalk Hub to ensure that your application will run on that piece of dedicated hardware. And again, this is covered in the more in-depth presentation for Optix. So if you're interested to learn about that and see a demo of that, please let us know. We could schedule a separate time to go over that in detail with you. Again, these are the tools in FactoryTalk Hub. Again, you just need to log into FactoryTalk Hub with your Rockwell credentials, create an organization, and you can have access to these useful tools. Now we'll go into the hardware options. And for Rockwell, there are 4 main hardware options that Rockwell offers that supports Optix. So for one are the OSM 6300 series of industrial PCs. These are, you would use these industrial PCs if you need higher power and stronger specifications to run a more comprehensive or more complex application. Now, if you're planning to run Optix on an OSM 6300 industrial PC, you will need to also consider getting the runtime license, so we'll need to size up the license for you. But again, this is only for applications that exceed the 15 token count. Now we also have optics panels. These are basically like panel views, but for optics. And these come with runtime licenses already built into the hardware itself, so it's ready to use out of the box. There's the embedded edge compute, which is an edge device that has no display and is actually plugs right into the chassis of a control logics. So it keeps your optics application closer to your processor and operates and communicates with it over the backplane. So it gives you higher speed communications, so you could push more real-time data to your edge application. And finally, the optics edge. This is like the embedded edge compute, but it doesn't have a dependency on a control logics chassis. This is an independent standalone device, sits on the DIN rail, and does much of the same edge capabilities as the embedded edge compute. Now, a bit more detail into each one. Rockwell's industrial PC portfolio is quite robust. We have over 5 million different configurations ranging from different form factors, your choice of specification, right? What kind of processor, how much RAM, how much storage would you like in your devices? We have touch screens as well, and we even have solutions for hazardous locations, and we have thin clients. So if you're interested in using a Rockwell Industrial PC, not just for optics, but for any application, well, feel free to reach out to us and we can put together something for you. Now, the optics panels themselves, again, these are like panel views for optics. They come in two families. There's the compact family, which are your 4 and 7-inch screens. The specifications are a bit on the lighter side, so these are designed for simpler applications, smaller standalone applications usually. And then you have your optics panel standard. These are your larger screens from 7-inch all the way up to 21.5-inch screens. These have stronger specifications compared to a compact and can handle more complex optics applications as well. And all of these have different bezel types and screen types as well. They have resistive pressure activated touch screens, or you can have your glass capacitive touch screens. They come in standard aluminum bezels, but there's also stainless steel versions as well. So a lot of useful and great options. And it's a great value too. In terms of cost, an optics panel standard sits somewhere between optics PanelView standard and a PanelView Plus 7 performance. So pretty competitive. And when you factor in the free development software, it's quite the competitive solution compared to PanelViews. And why would you use an optics panel versus an industrial PC? So for one, this comes with the runtime license already included, so it's ready to run out of the box. All you need to do is a quick firmware update and you're ready to develop it with the free software. It's an all-in-one solution, so there's no additional parts that you need to pair with an optics panel to get it to work. No additional licensing, no additional hardware at all. And finally, it runs a closed version of a Linux Octo operating system. So this makes it only able to run optics applications. No one has access to the operating system. No one can download anything else or run anything else on an optics panel. So it provides some inherent security and implementation and maintenance. Now, FactoryTalk Optics for Edge. So if you're looking to do any of these capabilities listed here, for example, web-based dashboarding, if you're looking to do some middleware applications, maybe you're looking to run an OPC-UA server with several clients out in the field, maybe it's specifically MQTT application, you're looking to port some data over to a cloud application, or maybe it's simply just a protocol gateway or some data logger or data collection gateway. Maybe it's a combination of all of these. And if you don't need the presence of a physical display, then you're probably looking at an edge application. And there are a couple of hardware for supporting dedicated edge applications. For one is the embedded edge compute. Again, this sits in the control logics chassis, and the value of having your optics application running in a control logics chassis is it keeps it closer to your controller. So you can analyze larger amounts of real-time data, utilizing the speed of the local backplane. It keeps it, and by keeping it closer, or by using a slot in your control logics chassis, it doesn't really take up any more footprint. right? As long as they have a spot in the chassis to plug this into, and it gives you a closer and tighter control over who gets to access this device. Now, the other option is the Optix Edge. So if you don't have a slot open in your Control chassis, or maybe you're using a different type of controller, like a Compact Logix, but you would like Edge capabilities in your application, the Optix Edge Standard is a great option for that. So it comes in two sizes, one with 5-token runtime built in, or one with 8-token runtime built in. And the Optix Edge can do everything that the embedded edge can do, right? You can collect, analyze, and push data to the cloud or to your enterprise layer. It can act as your remote access gateway using FactoryTalk Remote Access. It also supports two independent Ethernet ports. So you can have one dedicated for your OT network on the LAN side, and you can have the other Ethernet port connected to your internet, for example, as your WAN. So if you want to send out emails or if you need to connect to the cloud, right, the Optix Edge can do both. And finally, Optix Edge does something that the embedded edge can't, which is providing some standard network functionality, right? Network address translation, it could do some routing and internet sharing. And for those who are familiar with the Stratix 4300, you'll find that the form factor and functions are very similar. And it honestly, it uses the same chassis as the Stratix 4300. So it's like a Stratix 4300 with the ability to run Optix Edge, to run Optix applications. And finally, with the Optix Edge, you can even run your own applications as long as they can be containerized, right? You can run containerized applications alongside Optix inside the Optix Edge. So really cool piece of hardware. And we have a demo in the lab if you would like to come down to our Tomorrow Lab and check it out. And finally, all of the dedicated Rockwell hardware that we just talked about has built-in FactoryTalk Remote Access endpoint functionality. So for those who are not familiar, FactoryTalk Remote Access is Rockwell's remote access VPN solution, and it allows you to basically remotely connect to an Optix device from your office to someone's facility miles away through the internet, through Rockwell's secure VPN cloud servers. And it gives you the ability to just perform remote troubleshooting, right, remote programming, or remote deployment or maintenance to any Optix device out in the field. But a lot of Optix devices support the professional level of remote access. And the professional level remote access enables that piece of Optix hardware to act as a full-fledged remote access gateway, giving you the capability to not just troubleshoot or maintain or program that Optix device itself, but it gives you access to all the OT devices on the network. So if you need to help troubleshoot someone's controller that's connected to Optix, as long as it has a professional level remote access on that piece of hardware, it can act as the gateway to enable you to access that controller and program it or maintain it. So FactoryTalk Remote Access, by going with a dedicated Optix hardware, you already have one half of the solution, and the other half is the FactoryTalk Remote Access Manager. This is the management client that is managed through a web browser, and this enables you to create and maintain VPN connections to your remote access endpoint devices. It allows you to manage the users and accounts, so it gives you the ability to give privileges, right? Read or write access privileges to any users who log in through the FactoryTalk Remote Access. You can register your devices on there, and there's also additional capabilities as well. Honestly, FactoryTalk Remote Access is a pretty comprehensive solution, and we have a dedicated presentation for that as well. So if you're interested in learning more about FactoryTalk Remote Access and how you can utilize Optix hardware to essentially integrate it into your application, please let us know and we could schedule a focused presentation for remote access for you. So what's next? So this section is going to cover a bit of a preview of what's to come. For one is the FactoryTalk Optix AI Design Assistant. So this should be coming with version 1.8, at least the initial version of it will be coming out with 1.8, where you can generate screens automatically just by scanning an image. So you could take a picture or you could even hand draw what you would like your screen to look like, and Optix AI will create that screen for you, and it can even create the tags automatically and tie them to those objects for you. So pretty cool feature. It's still in the prototype stage, I believe, and I think this is coming out with version 1.9. It won't come out immediately with version 1.8, but what will come out with version 1.8 is the AI Copilot, where it's a generative Copilot. You give it a prompt or an inquiry, and it will give you links to helpful documentation, and it saves you the time of having to go through it for yourself. And there's also the ability to auto-generate some aspects of your project using AI as well. You can create objects, you can create information models, right? You can create your communications and connectivity through AI assistant. So pretty cool stuff. Again, we'll see the initial rollout in version 1.8, I believe, and then version 1.9 is where we'll get the advanced features like generating screens from images. Next up, coming in 2026, 2027 is the new generation of hardware. This is the Optix Panel Pro and the PanelView Pro. So these hardware adopt a more modular approach where the screen is its own module and the processor is its own module. So basically, the way it works is you would identify a screen size that you like to go with, and then you can identify what processor unit you would like to pair with it. Would you like this to be a PanelView application? Then you get the PanelView processor unit. If this is an Optix application, you would get the Optix processing unit, or you can get both and you can swap them with your screen at any time if you like to do that. So again, it's a modular hardware option, and this is also a bit of a soft PSA that the PanelView Pro will be replacing PanelView Plus 7s. At least that's what we've been told. And it's going to run an updated Windows 11 IoT LTSC. So currently PanelView Plus 7 Performance runs Windows 10 LTSC. That is soon becoming obsolete in a few years. So that's when the LTSC service ends for this Windows 10. So Rockwell is rolling out the PanelView Pro with Windows 11 now. Finally, Optix for SCADA. So this is something that's coming out with version 1.8, but we expect to see a more fully fledged version coming out with version 1.9. And what this is it enables you to take all of your deployed Optix stations, right? It could be an embedded edge compute Optix panel. It could be a web browser, a session of Optix or Optix Edge, and it allows you to centralize, aggregate, and manage it through a server here. So this gives you access, again, to centralized management. It gives you access to redundancy as well. So all of the applications will be cloned in a 3-node redundant cluster. So you have basically dual fault-tolerant redundancy in the Optix SCADA server. And it provides a central point for you to, again, aggregate all of the data coming from these individually operating hardware devices and port it up to the cloud. So again, this is still early, well, relatively early concept, but we're seeing initial rollout in version 1.8, I believe, and version 1.9 will be giving us even more features for Optix SCADA. So here's a list of things that you could do right now, or that is scheduled to be released with 1.8. And hopefully we'll get a little more information before the release to share with you. But if you're interested to learn more, just let us know. We could put something together and follow up with that. Okay, so that's about finishes the presentation. And are there any questions? And please, type them in the chat if you have any questions.
All right, I don't see any questions in the chat. You must have explained it that well. Thank you, Anthony.
Awesome.
All right, well, thank you for joining us for Talk Tech with Turtle every other Tuesday at 10 a.m. Check out our next topic on May 18th, Ethernet IP in Cabinet Solutions with Smart Components Specialist Peter Burns. Thank you, everyone.